Hello everyone, this is Mike History 2, and we are once again looking at some of the most important ancestors of Elizabeth II. So after our royal tour of Europe during the High Middle Ages, we are going back to, of course, England, since you know that is where the Queen is from. And so if we go back there, we see that one of her most famous royal ancestors was Edward I, known as Longshanks. He was born in 1239, and 10 years later became Duke of Aquitaine and Gascony. At age 20, he joined a rebellion of barons against his father. But after reconciling with him, he remained loyal during the Second Barons' War that began 5 years later. After the Battle of Lewes in 1264, he was taken hostage but later escaped and defeated the rebel leader Simon de Montfort the following year at Evesham. With the rebellion being defeated in 1267, peace was restored to England. In 1271, he led the Ninth Crusade, but on his way back, the following year, he found out about his father's death, becoming King of England and Lord of Ireland. After suppressing a minor rebellion in Wales from 1276 to 1277, he responded to another one in 1282 to 1283 by conquering the area, building settlements, and selling them with English people. When 7-year-old Queen Margaret of Scotland died in 1290, he was invited to arbitrate a succession dispute, but instead claimed Scotland for himself, and the First Scottish War of Independence began 6 years later. In 1294, he also went to war with France after it tried to conquer Gascony, which would not fully end until 1303. He died in 1307, leaving behind a war with Scotland for his son, and funnily enough was actually 85.5% French, with the rest being 4% Italian, 3.5% German, and he was only 1.5% English and Scottish. He was also 1.25% Spanish, 1% Russian, 0.5% Czech, Dutch, and Sorb, and 0.25% Swedish. Now, interestingly enough, the leader of the Scottish War of Independence was another of her ancestors, Robert the Bruce. He became Earl of Carrick in 1292 and Lord of Annandale in 1304. After the death of Queen Margaret, his grandfather, Robert de Bruce, 5th Lord of Annandale, became one of the contenders for the throne, and Robert the Bruce took part in William Wallace's revolt against Edward. In 1298, he was appointed Guardian of Scotland alongside with his main rival, John Comyn III of Badenoch, but resigned because of his quarrels with John 2 years later, and another 2 years later submitted to Edward in exchange for inheriting his family's claim to the throne. After murdering John in 1306, he got excommunicated but seized the throne and became the first king of Scotland since John Balliol a decade prior. However, his defeat by Edward that year at the Battle of Methven forced him into hiding before re-emerging a year later to wage a guerrilla war against him. He won several victories between 1310 and 1314, culminating in the Battle of Bannockburn, in which he defeated a much larger army led by Edward II of England and confirmed Scotland's independence. In 1320, Scottish nobles submitted the Declaration of Arbroath to Pope John XXII, declaring Robert as their king, which the Pope accepted 4 years later. In 1326, he also signed the Old Alliance with France, and finally completed the War for Independence in 1328 by signing the Treaty of Edinburgh and Nottingham, during which Edward II's son, Edward III, renounced his claims to Scotland. Robert died a year later, leaving a free country. Now, he was 55.5% Scottish, 35% French, 36% English, 3% Irish, and 0.25% Breton and Russian. However, that's not the last we're hearing of Edward III, who became Duke of Aquitaine and Count of Ponthieu in 1325 and was crowned as King of England and Lord of Ireland 2 years later, at age 14, after his mother and her lover Roger Mortimer deposed his father Edward II. He restored royal authority after his father's disastrous reign by deposing Mortimer, and after a successful campaign in Scotland, he declared himself the rightful heir to the French throne in 1337, starting the 100 Years' War, and more specifically the Edwardian War. This war went exceptionally well for him, which led to the Treaty of Bretigny, during which he became Lord of Aquitaine in exchange for renouncing his claim to the throne. Although, after 2 years, the title passed to his son, Edward the Black Prince, until his death in 1372, after which he once again became Duke of Aquitaine. Now, his half-a-century reign saw the Black Death ravage the country, but his victory in the Edwardian War made England one of the most powerful countries in Europe as his reign saw the development of the English Parliament up until his death in 1377. Despite starting the Hundred Years' War, he was actually 72.5% French, 7.75% German, 4.5% Italian, 4.25% Greek, 3.75% 4.25% Spanish, 3.75% Greek, 2.25% Dutch, 1.75% Russian, and only 1% English and Scottish. And he was also 0.25% Czech, Serbian, Hungarian, and Dutch. Now his son, John of Gaunt, who was born in 1340, like most people mentioned in the series, never became king, but was just as important, despite being the third son. At age 2, he became Earl of Richmond, and in 1361 became Earl of Leicester, Derby, and Lancaster. And the following year became the first Duke of Lancaster, which would become the foundation of the House of Lancaster, which would fight against the House of York in the Wars of the Roses. Nevertheless, his main legacy was not what he did, but what happened after his death in 1399, since he is actually the ancestor of all English and later British monarchs, starting with his son, Henry IV. And ironically, he was even the ancestor of several Yorkist kings through his daughter, Joan Beaufort, Countess of Westmoreland. He was 62.5% French, 13.25% German, 5.5% Dutch, 4.75% Greek, 3.75% Italian, 3.25% Cuban, 2.75% Spanish, 1.25% Russian, and once again only 1% English and Scottish. And he was also 0.25% Czech, Serbian, and Hungarian. Now the Wars of the Roses were able to come to an end after Henry VII's victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, establishing the House of Tudor over England and Ireland, with Scottish and French support, and strengthening his claim by marrying Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Yorkist King Edward IV. He restored English power and stability, and developed the English wool industry, and spent his money wisely, and raised taxes to increase national revenue. After his death in 1509, he passed the throne to his infamous son, Henry VIII, who would transform England. Now, actually, unlike almost all the previous monarchs of England since the Norman invasion, he was actually mostly English, I guess, or at least not mostly as in over 50%, but like that was his biggest amount, being a quarter English, a quarter French, and a quarter Welsh, with the rest being 7.25% Italian, 5.5% German, 1.25% Dutch and Greek, 1% Italian, 0.75% Cuban, and 0.5% Russian and Spanish. And so that is where I will leave off for today. I hope you learned something new. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe. And of course, for all of you, don't forget to like and share. And I'll see you next time.